Welcome. This is your ultimate boatless catfishing guide. We'll cover all the best baits you need to use, the right gear and rigs, and some habits and feeding patterns that make the catfish do what they do. We're going to cover the best baits to catch every catfish, the rigs and equipment you're going to need, and then just a little bit about their behavior and feeding patterns. Let's start with the best baits to use to catch each species of catfish and why each works so well. First up is chicken liver, full of blood, oils, protein, and fat that release a very strong scent into the water. And its soft texture is easy to bite into and hold on to. But the real trick is using pantyhose, if legal in your area, which holds it all together nicely and allows you to cast it out multiple times into the deepest sections of the lake without ever falling apart. Beef liver and turkey liver also work well and are a bit tougher in consistency, but usually you got to go to your local butcher shop to get those. And just as good as liver, if not better, is live bait. Also, if legal to use where you live, live bluegill, shad, herring, and perch will catch flatheads, channels, and blues too. The movement and wiggle of live bait in the water is irresistible to catfish and absolutely triggers their predatory instincts to feed on wounded or injured prey. Just make sure you cast these treats where catfish are hiding in deep holes and around underwater structure like fallen trees, submerged logs, and drop-offs. We'll cover a lot more of this in the rigs and gear section next. And next is cut bait, which is just big chunks of the fish we just mentioned, cut up into 6 to 8 inch size pieces, which are the primary food of the blue catfish. So back on the topic of live minnows, night crawlers, and shrimp will always catch channels, bullheads, and flatheads every day of the week. All fish, especially catfish, prefer live prey because it's what they eat naturally. And the movement and scent trail of live bait in the water is second to none. And finally, 2 more baits that work really well to catch primarily channel catfish are stink baits and frozen cheese-filled hot dogs. Stink baits, doughs, pastes, and dips are specially designed to emit potent odors that channels flock to from about 100 yards away. And the warmer the water you use them, the better and faster the scent disperses. And frozen cheese-filled hot dogs are amazing in ponds and smaller than lakes because of the high fat, protein, salt, and cheese content. It drives channels and bullheads crazy. We use them frozen so they stay on the hook better and allow you to cast out farther. Okay, now let's talk about gear, equipment, and rigs. To go catfishing, you got to have strong gear. Catfish put up a great fight. They don't go down easy, and you could easily catch a monster over 100 pounds. So we recommend an 8 to 9 foot heavy fiberglass catfish rod, like you see us using here. It'll allow you to cast out farther and absorb the fight of a bigger fish. And you need to pair it with a high-capacity spinning reel that can take at least 150 to 200 yards of heavy braided line. The minimum is 30-pound braid that we recommend, but we always use 50-pound in case we land a giant, and to handle the 40 to 50-pound snapping turtles that we also catch regularly on the bottom while you're catfishing. For hooks, you want to use an octopus circle hook, size 4/0 to 5/0 for channels and a bigger 7/0 to 8/0 for flatheads and blues. The circle hook is key because it turns into the corner of the catfish's mouth when you gently set the hook once he takes the bait, as opposed to gut hooking him. Now for the most common rigs for catfishing. Simplest is a slip sinker rig or a Carolina rig, which is ideal for river fishing or deeper lakes. You just take a slip sinker onto your main line, tie a swivel on, then attach a leader to it with your octopus hook at the end. Just make sure you're using at least a 1 to 2 ounce sinker to get it onto the bottom, or even heavier if you're fishing in a river with lots of current or in a very deep lake. Next is a Santee Cooper rig, which you saw us using at the start of this section, which is just a slip sinker rig, but you add a peg float 6 to 12 inches up from the hook to suspend the bait just off the bottom. And finally, there's a three-way rig, which is used out on a boat primarily or in deeper rivers when you're drift fishing to just let your bait drift with the current and, of course, cover more area that way. Okay, now for a couple really important tips. Hiding the hook, a no-no when catfishing. Lots of beginners hide the hook completely inside the bait to conceal it. Don't do that. You don't need to fool the catfish. They're not easily spooked by a big hook like other fish. So, when you don't leave some of the hook exposed, you ain't going to get the best hook set you need to land them every time, okay? And second, don't be afraid to change spots and locations if you haven't got a bite in 20 minutes or so, especially if you're using live bait and stinky, smelly, meaty baits, because if they haven't found it by now, they likely ain't in that spot. So don't be afraid to get off your can and change locations. Okay, on to the last section regarding how the catfish feeds, why they do what they do, and how we can always adapt our tactics and techniques to think more like a catfish so we can catch more catfish every time. We've already covered their preferred habitat, which they are mostly hiding out in submerged trees, logs, drop-offs, and underwater ledges. So if you cast into this type of cover, you'll automatically start catching more catfish, guaranteed. Now, in terms of their feeding habits, you know catfish are bottom dwellers already, and they're opportunistic feeders. If they're hungry, they're likely going to eat just about anything. But their natural diet in the wild is usually aquatic insects and their larvae, dragonfly and mayfly, for example, fish eggs and smaller fish fry, small fish, crustaceans like snails, mollusks, and mussels, and lots of algae, other aquatic plants, and various organic plant material that they find on the lake bottom. There are lots of environmental factors, though, that do influence the catfish's feeding behavior. First is water temperature. Catfish are most active and feed most consistently when the water temperature is between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, different catfish species will vary their feeding behavior. For example, channel catfish are bottom feeders, as you know. They use their barbels to locate food on the pond floor, whereas blue catfish will actively hunt for prey all throughout the water column. Timing is everything. You know that in life, right? It's no different for the catfish. They are most active feeding in lower light conditions, so the best time to catch catfish, like many other fish, is early morning or late into the evening hours and at nighttime, like we talked about earlier. Shaded areas during hot summer days will always be your best bet, and of course around underwater cover and structure like we talked about. And just kind of like us humans, we eat a good breakfast and a hearty dinner with a light salad for lunch. Catfish never stop feeding throughout the day. You just have to know where to find them. Hey, one more thing about the catfish's barbels or whiskers. Contrary to popular belief, the barbels don't sting. They're as harmless as a dog's or a cat's whiskers, but their fin spines can be sharp and poke you pretty good. So just stay away from them at the business end there when you're handling them if you're catching and releasing. Okay, now let's go over some lesser-known tactics and techniques for catching more catfish. Just some really great tips to be aware of. So when you're targeting your species, make sure you tailor your approach based on the time of the year. For example, early summer is when blue catfish spawn in many areas, a little bit later than their cousins. So if blue catfish are tough to catch during this time, make sure that you're targeting other species or waiting a little bit longer until they come off their spawn beds. We already talked about night fishing. Summer nights are probably the most productive time for catching catfish. So you can use specialty lights that actually attract zooplankton, which in turn attracts bait fish like shad and minnows, and of course all catfish are after that. And catfish will gather near these lights to start feeding. And then another fact is to fish in flowing water. So after heavy rains, areas with inflowing water will attract catfish and other species, so you want to fish near the mouths of tributaries as the lake water rises and falls. And of course, in rising water, you want to fish where the tributary narrows. Okay, thanks for watching, folks. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together. Just remember, the bigger the bait, the bigger the fish, especially when you're targeting catfish. They love big live bait, big cut bait, and big chunks of meat, okay? And remember to adapt your tactics to the season you're fishing and better understand catfish behavior. And every time you do that, you're going to significantly improve your success. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.